Welcome to Die Hard on a Blank, the podcast where we explore the influence of Die Hard on action cinema, one action movie at a time. I'm Philip Gawthorne, and with me, as always, is Liam Billingham, and today's film is Star Trek First Contact.
It's Die Hard on the USS Enterprise. Captain's log.
There's going to be a lot of real cornball
I
humor.
Immediately almost did a will. Captain's log.
Oh gosh.
Stardate.
Now I want to say off the top before
Walken.
we introduce our special guest, who is the perfect person to talk about this movie. I want to say right up front that this is something that this episode should be of equal appeal, whether you know nothing about Star Trek like me, or if you know everything about Star Trek, like today's guest, Andy Maiorano. Welcome to the show, Andy.
Patrick Stewart.
Andy Maiorano. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise. I have no idea who Andy Maiorano is. He sounds great, but I'm so happy to be here. I'm such a massive fan of your podcast, Phil and Liam. And Phil, you're a fellow European. I'm a Frenchman.
And how long are we doing this for? What are we doing?
Shut it down. Shut it down. Andy, this now right off the bat, one of the reasons you've been patiently waiting to come on the show. We've been very excited to have you, but we waited for the perfect film because this is your favorite movie, right?
That's right, Phil. This is so cool to be here to talk about this movie. I'm a massive Star Trek fan. It's my favorite. My favorite show of all time is The Next Generation, and this is the second of four, and it's the best one of those four, and it's my favorite movie of all time. And I remember when you were setting out to first launch the show, and you had a list of all the movies you wanted to consider, and you were like, Andy, I want to make sure you get a good one.
Yeah.
We talked about a couple of other ones, and then this one was on your list, and I thought it was hallucinating. I was like, there's no way that I just heard my favorite movie. And then I was like, oh yeah, Die Hard, they're in spaceships, getting taken over by the Borg. So yeah, I am so pumped to be here with you guys.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is that Andy actually is kind of directly responsible for me entering the realm of podcasting in the first place. So thank you for that, because we met in 2020 at the Underwater premiere, and you were there because you were friends with the actor John Gallagher Jr., who was in the movie. We got talking at the after party, and you had a Thing t-shirt on.
Yes.
And it turned out you had a podcast about John Carpenter called Sons of Carpenter, which was wonderful. It was like you went through his whole filmography, and I was like immediately like, can I come on the show? What movies haven't you done? And but then that one was kind of completing its life, but you were about to start another one. So the very first episode of any podcast that I ever did was discussing The Fog on your podcast, the inaugural episode of your podcast, the AndyPlex. So thank you for getting me started in the podcasting world. And
I love the story because you got me started as well on my own show. And yeah, we were coming to a close on Sons of Carpenter, and you really wanted to talk about a movie, and you said, please let's do The Fog. And I said, what do I do? And we became friends that night. You were texting me. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to do my own show. So thank you, Phil.
Yeah.
Honestly, so that's what really got me going. I was like, I'll do my own show. I'll interview people in the business or creatives, and we'll talk about a movie that they decide on. And the AndyPlex was launched.
Yeah, and we did a couple of episodes subsequently. We did Blue Thunder, My Fate, which I'm still refusing to lend to Liam, but I might like...
It's going to stay quiet over here.
I think I might change my...
almost kissing.
I feel like
God.
such a... It is
gotta work
totally...
on your philosophy.
It's really bad.
Yeah.
I need to get over it, and I need to lend you these movies, and we need to trick, because now you're getting Face Off 4K.
I have 2 kids, and you can just hang out with them and get comfortable.
Well, I would have to ensure that the discs do not get scratched, so it's like a very labor-intensive
Do you think I'm going to be like, oh, thanks for letting me do this, and like take a screwdriver out and start running it on?
Yes, I do. I do.
That's weird.
That's what keeps me up at night. But we did.
That's what keeps you up at night?
Among many other things.
Yeah.
Blue Thunder. We did Blue Thunder on the
Blue Thunder's
AndyPlex,
so
and then
good.
we did Ambulance.
Which is so good too. Yeah.
So
What's Ambulance? Is that
the Michael Bay?
Ha ha.
Yeah, I was joking. I actually
see.
almost bought
Sorry.
that on 4K the other day. I was just sitting there. I was like, should I get Ambulance?
I've already got it on 4K.
Yeah,
so,
I know you do.
we're
Can I
safe.
borrow it?
We're safe. Well, let's talk about it later.
Oh, cool.
Let's talk about it off mic. Well, speaking of Star Trek First Contact and your love for it, I want to just pin you guys down a little bit more on your respective relationships with this film and the Star Trek franchise in general. Starting with, as you're the expert, like where did your love of Star Trek begin? And was it the original movies? Was it the show? Which show? And then how did that all lead to this particular film, which you love so much?
Exactly. Yeah. So it all began in probably around 1990. I was, call it 6 years old. I'm born in 84. So Next Generation was in its heyday. It was going into its fourth season. And my parents were big Trekkies or Trekkers, or just Star Trek fans. Back in the day, they liked the old one. And I remember my dad sat me down to watch the original series. And I was like, I don't like this one as much as the new one. I really like Next Generation. And we sat down, we watched it week to week. And then after that, it was rerunning, and after school every day. I mean, I couldn't wait. My brother Gianni as well, who's also been on my show.
Shout out to Gianni.
So yeah, mom and dad, it was a family affair. We sat down every week and we watched it, and it kept going all the way to today. And still, I'm actually hosting the new shows right now, Discovery and Picard and Strange New Worlds every week here at the AndyPlex. And Star Trek's pretty much my favorite thing in the world. It's just my favorite thing in the universe. It's just, I mean, at the time when I was a kid, I don't think I was conscious of these things, but it just teaches you so much about humanity, about exploration, about understanding. At the time, I was just like, oh, ships and phasers and fighting and aliens. And it's really fun adventures, but every episode gave you a lesson. It gave you just a real cool insight into an idea or a philosophy. And it's one of those things that it is a philosophy. I don't want to say religion. That's probably a strong word, but philosophy is definitely one thing that it is. And then I just thought it was what would happen with all the series, but we got to see big budget episodes on the big screen. And we had Generations in 94, and then, which I really enjoyed. But then when
sort of panning of the baton, right? With Captain Kirk and Jean-Luc Picard, right?
Exactly. So I got to see the two together, which was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that one's great. But then when this one came out, I'll never forget, one of my good friends, Rich Durkee, shout out to him as well, massive Trekkie. He said, oh my God, Andrew, he got to see it before me. He's like, this is the one.
Yeah.
And I never forget, it was...
This one?
Yeah, First Contact.
Okay,
yeah. First Contact.
I say this one because it's on the TV.
Yeah,
it's on the wall, literally
Plex,
behind
so we're surrounded by the movie.
We got First Contact everywhere. It's like Borg.
You can't escape. Borg. Yes, we are assimilated.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So it's always been a huge part of your life and connection with your family, and there's the philosophical underpinnings.
Right.
Look, before I explain my relationship with it, which is fairly small, Liam,
yes.
Where are you at with Star Trek in general?
My family grew up watching The Next Generation together. It was an on Sunday nights.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, so we watched it on
late
Sunday
80s
nights.
was this when it started?
So
87 and 94.
I remember watching it, like it was like what we did. There's one episode, I can't remember, but it was a really gross episode, and there were worms, and there was something behind someone's ear, and I have like a very distinct
Conspiracy.
memory. Yeah, maybe I have no idea, but I have a very
that was
distinct
season
memory.
1. That is one of the most horrifying episodes. In fact,
I think I remember that.
That was proto Borg. They were originally going to be the Borg, and it was called Conspiracy. And all of a sudden, all the top officials in Starfleet were becoming basically taken over. It was like a body snatchers.
So I have that memory. I saw this in the theater when it came out with a friend. I am not like I think the term Trekkie is offensive, to be honest, because like. It's not like you're like, I'm a huge Star Warsy or whatever. Like I feel like it's like synonymous with nerd, so I don't like to say it.
Yeah.
I am not a huge Star Trek fan, but my hot take is that Star Trek is the most reliable, best franchise that exists.
Oh, I love that.
Because it's so... Well, I'll get to this, but I think its level of ambition and achievement is like the cleanest possible franchise there is. It never overshoots. It just does it just right. And I think that has a lot to do with who they let direct these movies and the embodiment of it. So it's not my favorite franchise, but I quietly think it's the best franchise that exists.
Certainly one of the most durable.
That's
right?
what I'm saying. Yeah, but I think it's because they execute on the best level.
I don't know when the first Star Trek episode. Do you know when the first Star Trek episode aired by any chance?
1966.
Because I was just wondering. So that's like just after Doctor No, in terms of like durable franchise. James Bond.
Right.
You know, but Star Trek has so much more. Has produced so much more than James Bond. I would imagine like. Probably, I don't know about the numbers of movies, but certainly when you think about all of the shows and the spin-off shows, and
I think there's far less movies, but that's because Bond is a movie-only proposition.
Yeah, there's 13 movies. So it's funny. I say that Star Trek.
13. Wow.
Star Trek is a show, but that it also has 13 movies, which is a lot.
It's just wild to think about. There's just no, and Star Wars has sort of gone the opposite way of being these movies, and then now becoming television series.
Television.
Well, and that's part of the thing is they're stuffing it down your throat. Like I'm a Star Wars guy. Like I grew up much more with Star Wars, but like I can't engage with any of it anymore because it's just too much. Whereas like it's like, oh cool, there's a new Star Trek. Like it's in the world. This is very reliable.
Yeah. It's always the quality of it seems to have been very consistent. I'll just say before we move on to our fast facts, because I'm going to be the audience surrogate here. I'm going to be the avatar for anyone that doesn't know diddly about Star Trek. I am someone who respects it a lot, deeply respects it from the points that you're making. Its socio-political importance, the fact that it was so groundbreaking in terms of like interracial relationships. It's humanism that was always in the show, the fact that there was this very positive philosophy that underpinned it. I think that is like wonderful, and science fiction can be a great source for good in that regard. So it's something that I deeply respect, but it's not something I have a tremendous affinity for necessarily, or was a fan of. So I'm coming to it completely cold and objective. And I will say I really enjoyed this movie.
Yeah, I was just really curious to see your guys' take on it from more of a lay person. I know it seems like Liam watched a lot of TNG.
We're sort of in the middle. You're the super hardcore. You're kind of in the middle. And I'm just know nothing.
So Phil, no TNG watching coming up, none of that.
It just wasn't my.
Because I know it's big in the UK.
It is. My taste leans more towards hard sci-fi and more, the more aggressive, violent sci-fi, more dystopian stuff. And this is sort of utopian, right?
Right. It is.
Again, like it's just not necessarily my.
Your cup of Earl Grey hot.
Indeed. But that's not to say that I don't, because I do have tremendous respect for it. And I say I really enjoyed. It was really fun to just be dropped into the mythology of this movie, not knowing anything that preceded it, not knowing anything that followed it, and enjoy it as a standalone experience.
And this was the movie I would use to try to assimilate, if I may, others into it. I'd be like, watch this.
Well, this one's special
check this out.
That's the beautiful thing about Star Trek. I don't think, especially like the movies, like I definitely went on Wikipedia and I was like, let me read a little bit about Jean-Luc Picard's relationship with the Borg. And I'd forgotten that it was in like season 6 of the show.
It was actually season 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
But let's just talk about the movie for a second. So, fast facts. Star Trek First Contact was released in the US by Paramount on November 22nd, 1996. 2 months after our last film, Last Man Standing, which came out September 20th of that year. It was directed by Jonathan Frakes, of course, who also starred, from a screenplay by Brannon Braga and Ronald D. Moore, based on a story by Braga, Moore, and Rick Berman, and of course based on the original Star Trek series created by Gene Roddenberry. It stars Patrick Stewart, Brent Spiner, Jonathan Frakes, LeVar Burton, Michael Dorn, Gates McFadden, James Cromwell, Alfre Woodard, and Alice Krieg. And on an estimated budget of $45 million, it grossed $146 million. So making a significant profit.
Money.
It was a hit, yeah.
Big hit. And I feel like this is what's interesting to me about it, is that I feel like this film did reach beyond the hardcore Star Trek audience. Like to people like me.
Yeah.
That were I remember I didn't see it when it came out. This was one of the few movies we're doing on the show where I had never seen it, but I do remember being like,
did you just see it for the first time for the show?
Yes, 2 weeks ago. So But I do remember being intrigued by it when it came out because it had like one of my big pulls is like people with fucking laser sights in the dark.
Yeah.
And it looked kind of Terminator.
Very cyberpunky.
Yeah, exactly.
And kind of Geigery too, right?
Yeah. So and that iconic shot of the Queen Borg being kind of created, or her head being added to that box.
Right,
there was
lowered into
shit
the
in it
torso.
that was like more aligned with my taste in sci-fi.
Well, the other thing it was sold on was
sure. The Borg are very horror.
Was Patrick Stewart with the Tommy gun. Like
Oh,
that
yeah.
was
Oh, yeah.
all over the ads here.
That was
and I think
so
that was
great.
enough
Cool.
for people to be like, maybe
this movie kicks butt.
maybe this is gonna be really cool or something, right? Like there was that energy to it.
This is going into the action realm more, and there were always. And Liam, you've seen the show. They were always like, "Oh, this is a creepy episode. Oh, this is a funny episode."
Yeah, they did a good job of defining every episode.
Yeah,
sort of
every episode
vibe
has a
in
little
the
bit of a
first few
different-
minutes. Yeah, and the cold
Right.
open. The cold opens were always like, "This is the kind of
Set
episode
the
you're
tone.
going to get." Yeah,
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
for any of our regular listeners who are confused as to what on earth has happened, this is a show about Die Hard and
you
the
didn't
films,
figure that
the
out
films that
already.
are influenced. So let's talk about why on earth we are discussing Star Trek First Contact within the context of of action cinema as we move to a section called
Die Hard DNA.
Now, this film does, and people did ask us about it on the internet as well. They were like,
Yeah,
"Are
actually,
you going to
recently
do
someone
it?"
was like, "Are you going to do First Contact?"
We were like, "Fuck yeah,
This
we
makes
are."
me so happy.
He said set phasers to do it. I don't know. Yeah.
There's a lot of that.
Set
sort of
phasers
stuff.
to
Tough when
Yippee-ki-yay.
you know what the jokes are, but you suck at making them.
Yeah.
So, but this would fit the classic definition of a Die Hard movie, as in bad guys take over a blank and it's up to one person or small group of people to fight back. And in this instance, it's the Borg taking over the USS Enterprise and it's up to Captain Picard to fight back. So there's a lot of climbing through air shafts and
I noted
secret
that.
corridors to avoid detection. The sequence, where they're outside the ship and the Borg drones are like
The zero
building
G.
a weapon.
Yeah,
that
that
really
shit
reminded me of
rules.
the stuff in Die Hard on the roof. Right, where the bad guys are like rigging the bomb, and it sort of there's like a change of energy. They're a bit more exposed when they're out there. You also have a scene where the hero of the movie has to go into the belly of the beast to rescue a beloved hostage from the clutches of the bad guys, right? That happens in Die Hard with McClane and Holly. It happens here with Picard and Data, right? Who he has to go in and rescue in pretty scary, intense sequence. And by the end of the movie, you've got Picard going full McClane. He's shirtless. He's wearing a tank top.
He's buff.
He's climbing on
he
cables.
is.
He's sweaty.
Swinging from cables. He's in full action hero mode.
Yeah.
So there's all of that stuff that I think is pretty clear in the fact that it's a siege movie and all of that stuff. But the other thing I would say to consider here is the strong Shakespearean connection of it all. Like when we talked many times on the show about how John McTiernan's Shakespearean influences on Die Hard and how Midsummer Night's Dream was his secret melody for it, etc., etc. But also the presence of RSC member Alan Rickman in a leading role. Here, not only is this film spearheaded by a highly respected British actor from the RSC in Sir Patrick Stewart, but also the actress Alice Krieg, who plays the primary villain of the piece, the Borg Queen, is also a highly distinguished RSC performer and Olivier Award winner, no less, for her stage work. And she also won a Saturn Award for her work in this film. So there's a lot of Shakespearean stuff going on, as well as
it reminded me of I
superficial aesthetics.
The actress's name, but the recent Coen brothers Macbeth, the actress who plays the witch, is like a very celebrated Shakespearean actress. I forget her name, but like that's who you cast in these parts, because like Star Trek has this sort of heightened musicality of language and style that like you can cast a Shakespeare actor in. And like it has the right feel for it. And also like
the grandeur of it.
Grandeur of it, and also like
and the themes, war and
Star Trek does really well is there's Undiscovered
military
Country,
hierarchy.
which is literally a Hamlet. It's a Hamlet. That movie has a lot to do with Hamlet. But Star Trek 6, I think, is the
Star Trek 6,
Country.
Undiscovered Country.
And it also feels like they give the like sort of lower characters in this the sort of classic Peter Brook RSC treatment, which is like every character matters. Like the second guy on the left has a story and a backstory and has his moments to shine.
Adam Scott, who we were talking about before.
Who has one line in this movie.
Small
It's
but
the
notable
Enterprise.
part.
I didn't know it was Adam Scott until about a year ago, and I've seen this movie 45
When I was
times.
watching it the other day, I was like, is that Adam Scott? And then sure enough, his name came up in the credits.
So cool.
And Neil McDonough as well. Another,
Neil McDonough's great as the
recognizable-
helmsman Hawk, who
recognizable-
kind of
What else?
took
Is he in
Wesley
Minority
Crusher's
Report?
kind of
Minority Report.
Okay.
Band
Minority
of
Report,
Brothers.
yeah.
He was in a show that was really good that was cancelled called Boomtown.
Oh, right. I remember
Right.
Boomtown.
Yeah. He's great in this one. And then he meets his demise in the sequence you were talking about at the 0G, where the Borg are trying to send a signal to the Borg in their time.
And Gates
on the-
McFadden, by the way, as well, who I actually have met.
Have you?
Because she has a theatre group here called, I think it's called Ensemble Studio
Yeah.
Theatre.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah.
she had.
She always
you
talks
know.
about that at the conventions.
So she's another theatre,
And she's back on Picard season 3.
You know, they all did a
Theater
play
person.
together.
So is Alice Kriege.
The principal cast all did a play together in like the 90s at the height of the show. It was, if I remember correctly, it was Picard. It was good God, Patrick Stewart, Gates McFadden, Michael Worf, and
Michael Dorn.
Michael
Yeah.
Dorn, Worf, and another.
Yeah.
They all just did a play together.
Do you remember what it was?
I have to look it up.
Oh,
again,
man, I
but
didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'd love to see them.
But it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
There's a theatricality to the whole
There is.
endeavor.
And being on the bridge, it does feel like a Shakespearean council room or a throne
Well,
room.
it's also
Yeah.
just it has its
You know, you
roots
got the
in
king.
theater,
He's
right?
on his throne.
Right.
It's played by Picard. I'm sorry, played by Patrick Stewart. And yeah, and he is very Shakespearean.
And he's very regal. As
He's
an
very
actor.
regal. His voice is just. I mean, I could just listen to the hum of the ship and him going on, and I'm in my Nirvana
Well,
space.
it's interesting to watch these movies because they, like you just said, they have their roots in like low budget television essentially. Like since the show is so old and it has contended with 50 years of history, the early episodes are like, well, we have a bridge and we have like a
Right.
fake
You have a
set
couple of
planet
sets.
and like
Right.
a couple sets, and so therefore it's like much closer to theater.
Yeah,
and
you're
I
right.
think that style, and I say this like. One thing I like about these movies is like they build tension in very normal ways. Like there's a little sequence in this movie where Picard is leading a team and Worf is leading a team, and they're walking down a hallway, and it cuts between the two teams. And every time it cuts, the music changes. So when it's with Worf, it has this much more like bup 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 bup.
Yeah.
And when it cuts to Picard, it's much more like long strings, and the cutting between those two things, there's just people walking down a hallway with like kind of silly looking laser rifles, but it works really
But the
well
tension is so
because
there.
they've cut it in a way that it's building to
Yeah.
something.
It's cut
and
so
so
well.
it's like it feels like television, but it feels like television that was a play a little bit, because like we have one set, and that kind of like that feeling of it, I mean this in the best way, the fact that it's like it's mostly just people talking to each other, and the
Right.
movies really are the ones that have like action sequences, because
Yeah.
the show couldn't really
Right.
afford to
It
do
opens
that.
it up.
There was
and
really
they
a
can be
line
more
between the show and the
expansive,
movie.
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Phil. I didn't mean to-
It's just interesting because to me, this, now that we're unpacking it, this movie in particular, but the Star Trek in general, is kind of this interesting. Well, this movie specifically, I should say, is a Venn diagram of Star Trek and all the mythology that's brought into it. Die Hard and those types of siege movies and Shakespeare, all in one package. But we'll get into that in a bit more detail when we dig into Anatomy of an Action Movie after this quick break.
Back to school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop tax-free August 2nd through 6th and save up to 70% off the latest school styles. The best of apparel, footwear, accessories, and more. Save at Nike Factory Store, American Eagle, Gap Outlet, Crocs, Under Armour, Banana Republic Factory, and hundreds more. There's always something happening. Discover the latest fun and events all season long. Tanger Outlets, your savings destination.
And we're back with our next section of the show, Anatomy of an Action Movie, where we explore the tenets.
We live in a Star Trek world.
And there are no friends
On the Enterprise.
Yeah, whatever.
Sorry, I don't know. I'm working here. Look,
whatever.
I'm doing the best I can. This is not my
speaking
world.
of temporal vortexes, the first tenet of Anatomy of an Action Movie is the premise, and the premise of Star Trek First Contact is thus: when he is informed that a hostile bloody hell. By the way, this was a real son of a bitch to wrestle into some kind of coherence. So this was complicated.
All right, let's give it.
Here we go. Here's my best stab at it. When he is informed that a hostile race of cybernetic beings known as the Borg have launched an attack on Earth, Captain Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart, disobeys orders to directly engage with the Borg threat. However, upon arrival to the battle zone, he discovers that the planet Earth has been completely subsumed by the Borg, who have used time travel to assimilate the entire planet. Picard follows a Borg craft through a temporal vortex and ends up in the past, sending his trusted first officer, Commander William Riker, down to Earth to make sure that history is not changed. However, in the chaos, the Borg board the Enterprise and begin rapidly assimilating the crew, placing the ship, the planet Earth, and the entire course of history in grave jeopardy. Now, I know there's more to it.
That is so
but
good.
That's my
good.
best distillation.
Bravo.
A little bit more complicated than there's a bomb on a bus. If it goes above 50 miles per hour, it blows up.
Yeah.
They kidnapped the president.
It's got a lot going on. Time travel. And that was really good, Phil.
Complicated to wrestle that into something. And of course, there's the first. I didn't even know like first contact refers to something completely different in the movie. It's not first contact with the Borg. It's first contact with between humans and aliens.
It was the Vulcans.
The Vulcans.
The Vulcans.
Yeah, humanity's
Damn it, I don't even know
first
that.
contact.
I can't wait for your quiz on this one, by the way.
It's going to be
That's
interesting.
Yeah.
So
the first quiz where Phil doesn't know the answers.
Hopefully I can. If I don't know them, I'll be sad.
The ticking clock is that unless Picard and the team stop the Borg, the timeline will be changed and humanity will be extinguished forever.
The stakes are high.
So let me just ask you this before. What I mean, we sort of touched on it, but why is it this film in particular? And your love of all these 179 other episodes of Next Generation and all the other movies. Why do you love this movie so much?
You know, I think because it is about first contact. It's truly about, it's kind of in a nutshell. It's kind of the whole thing in a nutshell. Humanity has reached out via, the warp flight. Zefram Cochrane goes on his warp flight. So it's really the beginnings of the Federation. It's funny. It's still in the future right now because it's 2063. But humanity's been decimated by a third world war. Humanity's not looking so good. We're not really looking great, boys. And
Thank God that's not a real problem.
I know. It's a little on the nose. It's a little too close to home. But we go on this warp flight, the Vulcans come down, and that's what first contact is, the moment we realize we're not alone in the universe. And then we form the Federation eventually, and we're off to the races. We figure it out. Star Trek is, again, it's utopian. We figured it out. We're all working together for a common goal. Humanity, we did it, guys. We did it. And I think this one just goes to the meat and potatoes and the core essence of what Star Trek is all about and challenges it. And you got the Borg, and they're scary, and it's an action movie, and it's so fun. It really is that diehard DNA of like, if we don't stop them here, it's over. The Star Trek that you guys love is gone.
Now, here's my other question, because I love all that. And
Can I ask a really quick follow-up? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Before this movie, had like first contact's been explained? Like, could you go on like, is there an episode that Zefram Cochrane is in before this one? Or is it like did you know going
just for anyone unfamiliar, that character is played by James Cromwell.
James Cromwell. So James Cromwell appeared on a couple episodes of TNG, but not as Zefram Cochrane.
Okay, that's really confusing. Sorry.
For fuck's sake.
But that speaks to how simple this shit used to be. You could just be on multiple you could play it. It's like Law and Order. Like Stephen Colbert was on 3 episodes of that show. It's different. No one used to think about this shit.
Oh, there's so many actors reused. You watch them all the time. They're in heavy makeup. You have no idea. But so there is a Zefram Cochrane episode of the original show. And
in the 60s show.
In the 60s show. The original TOS and then TNG. So TOS is the original series. TNG is the Next Generation. So you know about it, but this movie really does kind of cement it.
It sort of fills it out. Okay,
it does fill it out.
You remember when I specifically asked to stay focused on this film?
Yeah, but
otherwise we go into.
I do think that's important. I do think that's important. All right, ask your follow-up question.
My follow-up question to you was: This is your time to shine, Liam.
Okay.
All right, this is where you come up with your incredible insights. What do you think this film specifically, right, is about thematically? What is it trying to say?
So that was an obnoxious noise I just made with my mouth. I actually struggle with what this movie might be saying because, so this is like Star Trek is utopian. It's one of the best things about it, right? And it's like, hey, mankind went through some shit. Now we're in space. We're sort of, there's not a lot of people left on Earth, right? That's the idea, is that Earth, like, there's far less humans in the world than there were. And now we're like out here doing our journeys through space. And it's like, the idea is that like we live this like collective lifestyle. Like we're like, there's a collectivism. Everyone's living together. This is great.
Right.
So why are the Borg bad guys? Because they're kind of like, no, we're this like collective race of beings. Like we're a part of a hive mind, right? So it's like, on the one hand, and look, this is just me playing the game, because I actually think
we're peeling the onion here.
Well, I think the thing is that
individualism versus the collective.
Exactly. I think that Star Trek is about itself. That's one of the most interesting things. Like, and I say that like it's not like it is about hope and optimism. I think ultimately this movie is a bromance between. I think Data is sort of the key to this entire movie, because on the one hand, like, the Borg are like this way too extreme. Like you're gonna completely surrender your individuality, which is bad, because like this is a movie, it seems mostly about Americans like in space. So like, but that's too much. Like we can't go so we have to find this seesaw. And where is the seesaw?
Where's the middle ground?
The middle ground is Data. It's an artificial,
the best of both worlds, you might say.
Right, yeah, like an artificial intelligence who sort of
See, I'm all up in there.
Yeah,
I'm all up in the mythos.
Yeah.
You're doing great.
We had to wait 6 months for Phil to watch everything to record this episode. But no, like it's somewhere in the middle of like, Data is this kind of character who,
well, he's
like,
the machine that wants to become a human.
Yeah, or that like has achieved some human attributes, right? So it's like Data is the best of both worlds, because there's something like kind of reactionary in the idea, like, no, that's too much collectivism. Like, as opposed to like, no, like, where collectivism is good, but as long as like...
But isn't it about, again, to that point, isn't it about the balance? Isn't the goal to be like, you don't have to surrender your individuality to think collectively and think as part of, I am an individual, but at the same time, I'm also part of a society. And there should be, so that's why I'm not going to just pour my garbage on the street or just crash my car chaotic. You know, like there has to be some balance of the two things where you accept that we are part of a collective, but at the same time, I don't have to surrender my individuality. To me, is that would be the aspiration. I don't think it needs to be black and white, but
I agree.
You know, so I think that is really, it is cool, because there's a lot of underpinning philosophical and psychological or societal ideas in there. But there was another one that struck me the most about this film in terms of its thematics, which was wrestling with the nature of revenge and the idea, and this is very unusual in action cinema, especially in cinema in general. Cinema, especially anything that involves around guns, is like, revenge is cool and cathartic and necessary. But actually, what I love about this film is it goes, maybe not so much.
Right.
Revenge is actually terrible and just perpetuates an awful cycle of violence. Eye for an eye leaves everyone blind, right? And I think that's what Picard is kind of wrestling with. Is his desire to transcend that impulse, which is a very human, visceral, and tribal impulse towards violence and revenge for having been wronged by the Borg. And but how, as a military commander, right, is revenge the best motivation? I would suggest, you know what I mean? I think that's really interesting and unusual and subversive in a great way.
I love
challenging in a great way.
And so Picard in the show is the ultimate moral authority. It's always about what, and that's what the show is like. I got to make the right ethical call here with the information that I'm given. I have to make the right decision. And Picard, to me, and I think to many, represents that ultimate moral authority. But here, he is broken. He's traumatized by being enslaved into the hive mind, which you're not given a choice. You're assimilated, and that's how the Borg conquer. That's how they spread, is they assimilate you into their collective hive mind. Your individuality is gone. You become what's called a drone. Mm-hmm. You're enslaved. And here his decisions are very, very affected. And I think for a good chunk of the movie, he's making a lot of right calls. But then there's this part in the movie which is brought out so well by Alfred Woodard and her kind of outside perspective in this piece. And the two of them together are so good in the movie.
Yeah, two great actors.
Just so great. And she really, really shows him, and it's one of my favorite parts of the movie where we get to see, and I think that's so fun, and I'm glad that you guys are picking up on this stuff, because as a kid you were like, Picard's pissed, this is crazy.
Yeah,
like he's got some pissed moments on the show where he yells and screams, but
this
for the
is
most
out
part
of character for him,
it's pretty
right?
out of character. He's always composed, he always makes the right call. You know, they always say when he was young he was kind of, you know, hot-headed, but he's just so always together. He's very just composed, and here it's just like, we've got to stop these guys, they're horrible. And then there's that moment where we should blow up the ship and get off the ship. And he's like, no, I refuse. You know,
well, I want to talk about that. I want to
back.
talk about this line specifically because I think this is the greatest reading of a one-word, two-letter line in the history of cinema. When he says no, I talked about this a little bit in the Toy Soldiers episode with Louis Gossett Jr., how the greatest actors are able to use words like paint, or they're able to take a word and imbue it with a kaleidoscope of colors and meanings and ideas. And when she keeps pressing him and she says, like, Jean-Luc, blow up the damn ship, and he goes, no! And it like comes from the bottom of his soul.
It really is.
And he's saying so much in that one
no.
word. He's talking. It's like his pain, his determination, his anguish, his
This
hatred,
is my favorite part of the movie, by the way.
His darkness, his moral center. It's imbued with a million colors. That line.
You're right.
And it's really an extraordinary piece of what the greatest actors could do. We would take something as perfunctory as the word no, and
that's so
you
great.
know,
I'm glad you gleaned all
turn it
that
into
from
a
that.
canvas through which to express this phantasmagoria of ideas and emotions and thoughts. So for me, that was like such a powerful moment as someone that is not steeped in this mythology whatsoever, and there's really very little at stake in any of this. But I was like, that was powerful, and I almost wonder if that, having seen the movie in full context, that like. That moment is actually him realizing that he's doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yes.
Right? Like
it's honestly the turning point in the movie where he says, "You're right. We need to just do this. We need to blow up the ship." And he gives the order, like, you know, fight hand to hand to, you know, the guys on the front lines, and the guy's bloody, and he's like, "All right, I guess." And then he even, you know, he tells Worf that he's a coward, which is so out of character. "If you were any other man, I'd kill you where you stand."
Yeah.
That's such a great moment, because Worf's like, this isn't Picard anymore.
Right.
He's lost. The
It's
revenge,
what revenge
has
does to
consumed.
you.
Yes, exactly like you said.
Hatred.
The revenge has consumed him to the point where he's not making the correct decision anymore. He's not weighing the scales anymore. This isn't the Picard that we know. He's compromised. He is emotionally compromised, and he's letting his desire for revenge to. He doesn't want to surrender the Enterprise. They assimilate entire worlds, and we fall back. This far, no farther. The line must be drawn here. You know, and it's such a great moment because you never get to see this Picard, and this hateful, revengeful, yelling Picard who smashes the ships, which is an allegory.
Ego as well, a little
the
bit.
ego,
I think, right? Like
very
a little
much
bit of
so.
hubris involved in this.
Yeah, you're like, I'm not gonna back down.
Classical drama, right? Greek tragedy, right?
Yeah, right. Hubris.
You know?
Yeah, that your belief that you're above the gods. You know,
Absolutely. I love this. To me, was like, that was like, if we were referencing another one of our favorite shows, the Eye of the Duck scene. You know, was that scene, or even that one word, that one line delivery. While we're into it, let's talk about the hero of the piece in a bit more detail, about Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard. He's sort of like the thinking man's action hero.
Yeah.
In this movie, right? Like,
yeah.
You know, I just love that. It's so rare. You rarely have, with all of these movies, they're calibrated a lot. If you're a revenge movie, which is an entire subgenre, right? Mad Max, for example, Death Wish, whatever, Rolling Thunder, right? Some truly terrific movies, iconic movies.
Yeah.
John Wick, you know, a character who has maybe got a bit of an edge to them is wronged by people that are so beyond the pale in what they do. They do often to women or loved ones or whatnot. And then we get the catharsis of that character's bloody revenge, and we get to sort of enjoy it, right? Yeah. But this movie subverts that and says, actually, maybe that isn't the best thing to do. And the idea that a character is wrestling with the very nature of revenge and is philosophically compromised and confused about it, and actually wants to rise above it, I think makes for a philosophically fascinating action hero in this movie.
Yeah. I love this. I mean, yeah, again, he's broken, he's tested, and that revenge gets to the point where it's affecting his judgment in the wrong way. And he has to be called out. And usually Picard's the one calling out,
right,
on the show. He's
always
that's
the thing is, it's like, if I keep coming back to what the politics of the show are, right? Which is this idea of like, we live in this utopian state, everyone lives collectively, like, so justice actually has meaning, and so revenge is not justice, right? So as a result, Picard is this, like, he's unmoored from the reality that he's supposed to be living in, because he's a captain, but they're supposed to be on a peaceful mission, right? Like, that's the whole idea of Star Trek, is that they're not
to explore strange new worlds.
They're not like space
explorers,
cops like Marvel,
to seek out new life and new civilization.
Yeah, it's not like
not to conquer.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So they're going after threats as opposed to being one. But in this case, Picard kind of exits the philosophical idea of what the Federation is supposed to be, which is like, let's go for science and for humanity. Let's explore strange new world. I forget the whole spiel. But so it's actually an interesting inversion. And in that sense, like, it's interesting that this movie would come out at the height of action cinema when Face Off, which is a movie we're going to come up to soon, is also a movie about getting revenge, right? With Travolta wanting to get it. And I'm only thinking about it because we watched it recently, but like, this comes out at a time when like, we're sort of dealing with that's like every week there's a movie about revenge coming in or something like that. So this movie kind of uses
that's what's so great about it, is that it actually questions our the natural instinct towards revenge as the simple solution. Of course, these are fictional movies, and within that context, they can be fun and it's fine. But I love that this has higher aspirations. I love that it's actually
like Hamlet, which is a key text to Roddenberry for creating the series, right? Which is the ultimate Hamlet. I mean, the ultimate revenge story is Hamlet. Hamlet is all about revenge.
You're right. Yeah, and like you said, Star Trek 6, Undiscovered Country, they quote it. The Klingons even quote it. But in this movie, we have to have Picard called out by Alfred Woodard, and he's like, "This isn't about revenge. This is about saving the future of humanity." Bullshit. You're not the first person that I've seen to get a thrill from murdering someone.
Yeah.
Where were your evolved sensibilities then?
Yeah.
And he's like, my God. And then she has to call him literally Ahab. And then she's like, "You do have books in the 24th century." And then he quotes it. If his heart had been I believe in the original text it's a mortar, but he says cannon in this. If his heart had been a cannon, he would have fired his heart upon it, And he realizes that he is compromised. And that's the moment where he's like, all right, we got to blow up the ship and get out of here. And it's really is the crux of the movie. And I'm so glad that you picked up on that. But yeah, he's just like, I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to back down. And he's lost. And he's caught by her. And that's why I think it's the root of the movie. And you nailed it, where revenge takes you over.
If terrible people do terrible things to you, isn't the better thing to aspire to be better than them, not the same? Or worse? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
I guess it depends.
Yeah, I mean, it's all circumstantially dependent, right? But like, I would suggest that it's the difference between, I'm getting a little, it's the flesh and the spirit. The flesh visceral flesh wants bloody, thirsty revenge. The spirit should aspire for something greater, I would suggest. But I love that Star Trek is like, pushes us to think differently. And it says, like, lift up. Like, stop looking at the dirt. Look at the fucking stars.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As a society.
Right. Again,
and I love that.
It's the embetterment of the species. And that's why I love it so much. It's because, the world can be a very dark and scary and nasty place. And Patrick Stewart himself said he's not going to play Picard anymore after doing the movies. He appears in a couple of episodes.
He just had to put one more kid through college, and then he was all dead.
Yeah, but
he probably owns the college at this point.
They begged him to come back for Picard, and he said that he feels like the world needs Captain Picard.
Yes.
And he says over the years, he was blown away by how many people came up to him and said, "Your show helped me get through this or X or Y. And you showed us a vision of humanity that, where we can rise above." Because yes, Like I was telling you guys before, I don't want to get too into it, but I was attacked by a crazy man on the street a couple weeks ago. And part of me said, man, maybe I do want to try to like hunt this guy down or stop him. But ultimately, I'm like, I hope he finds peace.
Right.
And I was okay. I got away. I hope whatever, this man finds some peace. But if you're gonna go down that road, if you're gonna commit revenge, you have to dig 2 graves. Is that the? I think that's like the
something
quote?
like that. Sure.
Yeah. So you lose a part of yourself when you go down that road.
Absolutely. What would it say? I mean, first of all, terrible thing. We're getting quite impersonal, but it's good. I love this. First of all, awful thing that can happen to the best of us can happen to anyone at random. But what would it achieve? You go and hunt that guy down and then bash his head in, right? And then it's like, I achieved revenge.
Now I'm a killer.
What does that? What does that do?
Yeah.
Does
that heal me
exactly.
in any way? Yeah.
It's the expression I heard recently I thought was really interesting was like hatred is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yes, that's a good
but
one.
it's very hard to transcend these instincts because they are they're powerful, right? But it is my point is just when we can move on, but that I love the fact that even for someone that's a complete novice to all of this, like myself, I love that a long form pop cultural piece of storytelling exists that makes us look at the world, at our interrelationships differently, and sets higher aspirations for it. And that's why, even though I'm not a fan of Star Trek necessarily or a hardcore fan, I'm a fan of it in principle because I love that it exists and I love that it's offering a higher kind of higher state of consciousness. To quote Josh Wink, the 1990s dance pop song that we all remember so well. Let's move on. The villain of this piece is Alice Krige as the Borg Queen. What a fantastic performance in this movie. Holy shit.
So good.
She's really good.
Mesmerizing.
Mesmerizing.
I mean, this to me is what was the sign of a great actor. Someone who doesn't need like histrionics to be riveting. Is soft-spoken, is quiet.
Seductive.
It's like, absolutely. It really...
This is a Star Trek where Data fucks. I just want to say.
Is there an S&M aspect to this, like with this character?
Well, there's something
it felt very
Geiger,
Hellraiser-y.
Yeah, the Borg are very kind of goth, Hellraiser-y. Again, like the cyberpunk elements as well. Transhumanistic. There's a little bit of Geiger in the design. And again, Jerry Goldsmith, which we have to mention doing the score, like, just giving that kind of existential transhumanistic horror quality to everything paired with the Geiger-y look. I really feels like takes it to the next level. But yeah, I argue that, and I remember having this argument back in the day, like, oh, the Borg are a hive mind. They're not supposed to have a figurehead. But the Queen, I think, really gives us that focal point of having a villain that is one person. And she represents the collective.
Dramaturgically, it's impossible to have it just doesn't work to not have a focal point, right?
Yeah, for the sake of the dramatic, and especially for it's a film. And on the show, it was like you'd cut to just seeing kind of like the inner part of the ship with all the guys hooked up, and it was this collective like voice, "We are the Borg," So it was creepy and cool, but I think if you're going to take it to the next level, you really do need to have somebody. Needs personification. And she does such a good job, and there is that seductive element, and I'm so glad you crossed the.
Because she's hot. I'm sorry, I just had to say it. Someone
she
has
is.
to say it.
No, I remember as a 12-year-old, I was like, "Am I going to have to see a shrink?"
All horny for the Borg Queen.
There's something hot about it.
Yeah, the lipstick, the part where she breathes on the skin that she grafted in the Goosebumps.
It feels very S&M kink,
well, it
domination,
it's actually very Cronenberg-esque, the kind of synthetic,
psychosexual.
100.
Yeah.
Freudian almost.
I think there's.
Yeah, because she's like the mom,
so the
queen
Borg's
mom.
intentions are bad, right? They want to consume everything in their
off of what you
path.
said, Liam, they are. They've taken it too far. They've taken it too far.
Yeah, but like I'm also like, I don't know. I'm like pushing back on Star Trek's philosophy a little bit here because like on the one hand, like it's like. That you mentioned the goth thing, and I feel like in the 80s and 90s, it was like, oh, goths are bad. Goths are weird. You know what I mean? And so it's a little bit like, without getting, I don't want to become like adversarial about it, but I'm a little bit like, so what? So they're kind of like, kinky weirdos. Like, that's fine. I mean, of course, I know, like, again, like the there's part of me that like dramaturgically understands all of it, but the black and the dark, it's a little like, because especially juxtaposed against this like kind of militaristic hierarchical system that's in place, like with the Federation. It's a little bit like, if the Borg weren't consuming planets, maybe
are we kink shaming the Borg? Is that what we're doing?
I don't know. I'm struggling with this a little bit.
We need to sort of check ourselves because we're being a bit prejudicial. Just because they want to assimilate people and destroy humanity.
Yeah, okay. I did say there was a line. I'm just
maybe you guys are right. Maybe they're not so bad. No, I think it's
Borg.
The Queen is so compelling and kind of makes a reasonable argument that it does make you question.
Right?
Are they all bad? You know, or do they have a point? You know, it's an amazing performance.
I think it's also fair to say that like the question of so Star Trek starts in 1966.
Yes.
We're entering the sort of like post 1950s conformity of like the post-war period. We're entering this like psychedelic hippie 60s where we're all like, let's all just smoke grass and live together. And like we all kind of we kind of poo-poo that now as people because we've all become a little more conservative. But like they were kind of onto something there, right? So like the idea that like this is born out of humanity can transcend its limitations and like still be individuals, but live in this exploratory like utopianist state. It's interesting to like look back on sort of Star Trek, and I know that it still exists, and like I think in theory I think about it as like quite a positive thing, but it's just interesting to think a little bit about like what's at the edges of the conformity.
You sound like you're a bit of a Borg apologist.
I've might be a Borg apology.
I don't know what's going on. It's like it's gone so liberal that it's gone right back around the other.
Maybe you're right.
The other way.
Yeah. Look, guys.
I just let the Borg assimilate and stop oppressing them.
In the spirit of podcast, I'm just asking questions. Okay.
No, it's good to have. It's good. You know, and you know, any good villain doesn't think they're the villain, right? Like that's a classic.
I think that
classic
actually
the
point
and
that
they do have points.
The point that I didn't get to that I think is interesting is that the Queen's like, we're better than humans. We're more human.
And on one hand, she's right.
A little like replicants in Blade Runner, right? And this continues that tradition of like, what is human? What is humanity? Now, this movie outright rejects it because it's not about that. Blade Runner is about the nature of being a human. This is kind of about that, but it hasn't. There's no like. You can't pass. A Borg can't pass as a person, right? A replicant can pass as a person. So part of the tension in that movie is about like who is human, right? Whereas in this, the Borg are like definitely not human. But what's interesting is again, it all comes back to Data. It's what she offers Data. She's like, join us. We're better than humans, right? We live this collective consciousness. Now, it looks disgusting and awful. So, but it is just interesting that. Again, the whole like sort of central idea of the movie, is around Data and what does Data want in his life, and he wants more to be a fallible human than some kind of transcendent.
He's starting there. He's got the emotion chip. So one of my favorite lines is when Picard tells him to turn it off. He's like, Data, there are times that I envy you. He's like, turn off your emotion chip, right? He's like, I believe I'm experiencing anxiety. But yeah, the Queen, off of Liam's point. The Queen is offering him more humanity, and they're starting to graft skin onto him. And then we get that sensual shot with the lipstick blowing on the goosebumps, and he's like, I was not programmed to
because he's turned on.
He's really turned on.
Data horny.
Yeah, got the goosebumps, got the whole thing going on. I am programmed in sexuality, but yeah, so she
Brent
really
Spiner's
is offering.
Incredible.
He's
an amazing actor.
He is brilliant.
He's brilliant.
I feel like he got
good.
really pigeonholed in this, but like Brent Spiner is a great fucking actor because this is one of the most indelible creations.
It's very moving what he's able to do.
Yeah, and he has this wide-eyed kind of like approach. Like he's so human. He's like a little.
Yeah,
like a little kid.
Innocent. There's an innocence.
There's a wonder. There's an innocence and wonder to it. I know, and you're like, oh, he doesn't have emotions, but he actually always kind of did. He always has this kind of like thirst to want to grow.
Well, and I think he's not cynical. He doesn't have a cynicism.
He's not cynical,
right?
Yeah,
like he doesn't have, and not that I necessarily think the crew, but like. You know, there's a little bit of Data in the way everyone treats him, but that's
silly
because
Data.
Because he's like a little bit of a kid. You know, that's one of the things that I like about this movie is on the screen right now is Cromwell is this kind of like I like to get drunk and act like an idiot, and like no one in the future does. Everyone in Star Trek is very like prim and proper and Shakespearean, right? Like, and so to have Cromwell kind of be like, let's put on some music and do shots is like kind of a refreshing.
Yeah, I got the magic carpet ride, the Steppenwolf.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is like I just watched Easy Rider for the first time, actually, and I was thinking about that. But I'm so glad you brought that up, Liam, because I love that. And Cromwell, it kills it in this movie. He's so good. But the idea that one of our kind of legend or hero figures, he's kind of like a combination between the Wright brothers and like a Jesus, because the Wright brothers.
He's supposed to be Jesus. He's absolutely
he's definitely
Jesus.
right. And we got
here I go again.
The
he's
Phoenix.
A Jesus stand-in. No, he absolutely is. He's a reluctant.
Yeah. And they've all projected this perfection onto him, and he's just a guy. And he's borderline alcoholic, and he says he did it for the money.
I don't know if borderline is enough.
It reminds me more of like the founding fathers. And how there's so much of veneration in American society for these guys, but if you look into them,
they had slaves.
They're just as flawed as any person was of that particular era.
They're humans,
right? So that's another whole. This is why this film is so thematically rich, because there's this whole other element about the what's the character's called?
Zephyrin Cochrane.
Zephyrin Cochrane, who's an important figure in the mythology. Right?
He created warp drive, which makes us go to the next level. Where
again. False gods, right? Like,
well, he also runs from it. That's what makes him a Jesus. Like, the night Jesus is supposed to get crucified, he's tempted. He's like, I can't, like,
and they're all fanboying all over him, and he's
and he's like, I can't handle this.
You told him about the statue?
Yeah.
I think
it's too much.
It's a really interesting, again, hubris, ego, all of these sort of thematic ideas, and then just tying that back again. The thing. It made me think earlier, I almost said, speaking of the Greek tragedy element of Oedipus, and then you bring in the Borg queen to that and her relationship with Data, the childlike. You know what I mean? There's deep, sophisticated literary and theatrical antecedents underpinning the storytelling here, which I think is like real, what makes it resonant and durable over time.
It also doesn't flash
that
now. Shit in your face. Like, I feel like now there's a lot of like, it's like Shakespeare, whereas like it just kind of calmly.
But that's us, isn't it? That's our role as society. Toy Soldiers is like Shakespeare.
No, it's like Peter Pan, actually. But like I think. It's very like sophisticated. Star Trek is very sophisticated.
Yeah, and
no, I love that you guys are getting all this from it.
Also, the storytelling over the long form is very challenging as well.
Yeah.
And to do self-contained, closed-loop stories that are satisfying themselves, but that are part of a wider tapestry. It's not easy to do. I want to move on to the section. This is an action movie podcast. I want to talk about this movie objectively.
I thought this was a Shakespeare podcast.
That was a Tenet podcast.
It is.
Objectively, the action in this movie. How does this movie fare as compared to the other action movies that we've been talking about on the show? In it, just purely in a vacuum. Is this satisfying as an action movie, in your opinion?
I think it's satisfying as a action Star Trek action movie, right? Like, because it's kind of stagey. Like whenever someone like sort of stands very still and fires a phaser, it's like that's the most Star Trek image in the world to me, right? But like, I think that what I'm most interested in Star Trek is not like what it's necessarily about, but like how it is about the things that it is about. So like I love how it feels like television in a lot of ways. Like this is a big jump up from an episode of the show, but it still has the roots and like close combat fighting, the phasers, like people, and they like that was me, fading away or whatever. Like it has this kind of like it doesn't. Let me put it this way. The budget and the style of the movie feel above an average episode of the show, and yet it still feels like an episode of the show, which is like very appropriate, right? If suddenly, because like I enjoy the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. I think they're a lot of fun, especially that third one. I think the third one rocks because it feels like an episode of the show.
Beyond,
yeah, but they are so cinematic. In a way, the earlier entries are not, because they're not. It's J.J. Abrams, who's
the camera's moving around like crazy.
Yeah, and it's his style. But he clearly sought to break away stylistically from the earlier, more televised roots of it, and that's what I find very satisfying about the Star Trek movies is they feel like the TV show, and so the action is like at the perfect level of ambition.
Oh, I love that so much. And I agree. So I'm obviously the heavily biased one. And when this movie came out, I was like, this. And it was like my friend telling me, he's like, Andrew, you got to go see this one. You know, it rips so hard. And it does. I mean, if you compare it to the 2009 ones and on, the camera's not moving around nearly as much. But I think Liam nailed it on the head where it feels like an episode that just happens to have a lot more budget behind it.
Yeah.
We're getting a longer episode. Obviously, the stakes are enormous, but we're getting a longer episode with more money and it's sexier. But it's still directed by Jonathan Frakes.
Yeah.
Which for me was
so
one of
important to making it.
so
yeah,
important. And apparently they were trying to court like Spielberg and they were trying to really take it to the next level. And I'm so glad that it ended up being 2 takes Frakes, baby.
Yeah.
Did he do how many of the movies?
He ended up doing Insurrection after, and then
he directed episodes prior to this,
he's
right?
done several.
But he didn't direct Nemesis, right? That was Stewart Baird.
Stewart Baird.
Right.
Stewart Baird, right.
Which is a more cinematic approach than these ones. But yeah, Frakes knows the show. He knows how to cover the show.
And he knows, and he's friends with these guys. And if you listen to them all, they just felt like the comfort level that they had on the show. And then even the new people felt so like, oh, I thought this was going to be a lot more stuffy and serious. But these guys all had a shorthand from doing it for
and
so
Leonard
long.
Nimoy directed, was a cast member, directed several of the previous movies.
Yeah.
So
who directed the original Star Trek movie from 78?
That was actually Robert Wise.
That's right.
Yeah, 79.
Yeah.
The motion picture.
Right.
Didn't
That's a
Shatner
good
direct one or
Shatner directed 5.
5? Okay.
And Nicholas Meyer did 2.
He did Generations,
and he wrote 4, and then he did 6, and then
Who
he
did the Wrath of Khan?
That was Nick Meyer.
That's right. Okay.
He wrote and directed 2, and honestly, 1 to kind of off of the same point. I felt like 1 kind of got away from feeling like Star Trek. And it felt very like 2001: Space Odyssey.
It's very post that.
Yeah,
it's absolutely a film of that. Slow, cinematic.
Right. And it didn't feel like an episode.
Yeah, it's like the antidote to Star Wars, which I think was very intentional.
Right, which got it going. And I'm so grateful because then Paramount was like, we have this property, what can we do? Very much.
Yeah, but they made a very
meditative,
slow. Yeah. That might actually be my favorite Star Trek.
I actually really, I do. It's funny, I used to hate 1, but I've come to love 1.
I think 1's great.
But I feel like 2 brings it back to being on the bridge, bringing it back to like an episode, very much like Frakes did here with First Contact. And he just really nailed it for me. And it doesn't, the camera's not whooshing around like it does in the JJ ones, but the action is there. And the Enterprise E is not the Enterprise that we grew up with on the show. No, we had the Enterprise D, which was kind of wider. It was kind of more white looking. It wasn't as dark and sinister as the E, which almost looks like a razor blade. And when that movie opens, when First Contact opens and you see the E and you're like, oh man, this is like an action ship. Like the Enterprise D is about exploration. This one is walking the line.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, you know, if you're a fan of TNG, that this is a much more darker, it's still obviously, space, the Final Frontier, still exploration, but this is a post kind of Dominion War ship where we need to kick more ass, and the action elements are there. We get quantum torpedoes, which are the blue torpedoes, which are more powerful.
Phil has some of those on his car. I don't know why.
Yeah, so it's cut faster, but yeah, Liam, I think you nailed it. Though it still feels like an episode, but it does just kick ass, and it moves quick.
I do think it is. Some of the direction is really impressive, and some of the signature shots. I thought that, like that Matrix-esque pull-out shot at the beginning.
That
where,
rocks
ass. He's assimilated, and you see this full extent of the Borg world. Yeah.
And he's in his uniform. He's in the TNG uniform.
And I think that's a really smart way to kick it off. Because you're like, this is not an episode of the show.
Yeah, it's like big scale, cinematic. And then the temporal wake sequence was like, it's very clear that's a complex sort of heady idea, but it was very well, the visual language of that was very well explained. Once you start to get into time travel, having written stuff as well, and that's time travel stuff is a freaking nightmare.
It's a nightmare
because of the rules of it, and because they're so ephemeral sometimes. But very well done. Like that sequence, very clean and clear, which is what you want. You want the rules to be clean.
You don't want people to be like, "Wait, what?"
And you don't want anyone thinking about it. It just needs to be like, you need to accept. Yep, got it.
And then
we made the switch.
The trailer shot of the Borg Queen's head being put on the body that was a real grab. There's some really, really good direction, and I think the action is generally really solid. I do want to just offer some before we move on to our last section of the anatomy, some critique that I had, because I don't want this to be a complete...
Hey, I'm a Borg apologist. There's been critique. What I'm suggesting is Borg, are they wrong?
Excuse me.
You're swallowing truth pills over there. That's what it is.
I thought that this film had some of the same weirdly relaxed energy as Toy Soldiers, where it's like the bad guys just kind of linger around and the characters have sort of adjusted to life, and it's like the Borg are just a bit of a nuisance. They're just they're just in the way.
There's like a moment when they're on Earth, and it's like what's her name? Marina Sirtis.
Marina Sirtis.
Marina Sirtis' character's just drunk. And Riker's like, "Ugh, you silly girl." And it's like, bro, your spaceship is getting taken over right now. Like, let's go.
I find some of that stuff, and maybe that's something in the show. Because,
that's the humor a little bit.
That brings us into the humor section quite nicely, because I did find that some of that stuff, the tone, where it would have these like, it's almost like the music, do.
Yeah.
It's just, we're going to have a little comic interlude here in the middle of these apocalyptic Shakespearean stakes, but Well,
I think
now we're going to have some fun.
Great movies have your comic relief moments, and I don't think they necessarily
but they
take
don't always
away.
tonally jar in the way that
you felt a little
in this.
Yeah, it does feel tonally inconsistent. Yeah.
Okay.
I think some of this though is just like, what I've been thinking about what you were talking about earlier is like, it's pretty interesting not only to think about like long form storytelling, but how you like can fit your 60-year-old property into a contemporary moment, right? So like, we're in an action era. We're also in like a pretty good comedy era, right? So like the movie has to a little bit balance these two things. And I think also when you ask people like, hey, you normally get this show for free on Fridays, but we're going to ask you to spend $16, $11 at the time to go to the movies to see this. Like, you got to give them the goods. They got to get their like, they have to get their like their moments that, you know, might feel totally different. Like, they're thinking not only about, because that's what's interesting is like the movies we've talked to so far, with the exception of a few sequels, they haven't been televised or franchisified in the way that this has. So as an audience member, it's like we gotta get this moment with you know the kind of will they won't they between Marina Sirtis and Jonathan Frakes, because they have that a little bit in the series, and like it's gotta play the hits. They have to play the hits.
Right.
They gotta play the hits.
And I think that's
and it was also a movie again. You're getting people to the theater, and the Picard in the movies kind of kicks more ass. Like in the show, Picard would never go down with the away mission.
Yeah.
In the original show, Kirk would.
Yeah.
But and so when he goes down right away, you're like, you know, Frakes kind of as the first officer should probably challenge him here. Like, no, you're not going, man. But because it's a movie and he's the action hero again, he's our guy. He's our John McClane. We got to have him kicking some ass.
I heard something about that apparently
more.
in the development was that it originally was the other way around.
Yes.
And that Picard was supposed to go down to Earth and Riker was staying on the ship dealing with the Borg, but Patrick Stewart, I think quite astutely, said, no, it should be the other way around.
Yeah.
It doesn't work because it's too passive what's going on down on Earth. It's sort of like, hey guys, could we
it's also...
And Frakes was directing
too. It's also
too.
the B plot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's the
like,
B story.
that's the other thing.
It's not as dynamic.
And that's television, right? You have your... I mean, movies, of course, have that too, but like, differently, right? Maybe movies now do more than they did in 1996, but it's like they are doing an episode of the show. It's just like a much more expensive, better lit episode of the show.
Yes.
And the experimentation...
The palette of this movie is beautiful.
Yeah, it looks great. And it's
so
also
good.
really interesting to think about, like, they had the time to light this movie.
Yeah.
Whereas with the original show, they were like, we got to shoot...
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah,
exactly.
they were cramming them in.
What I love about this is that where they're experimenting, to come back to your point about the tone, where they're experimenting in the show is like, let's make a very dark episode of the show on the Enterprise. The show doesn't, with the exception of a few ones we talk about, never gets quite this dark. You need the everything else to kind of be like, let's give them that like Star Trek that's like fun to watch.
The
and
cozy
enjoy.
vibes.
Yeah, the cozy vibes.
Because there's also some like hardcore S&M horror going on.
Yeah, the Hellraiser. I love that you brought Hellraiser up.
But it is broad, it is broad.
The comedies, I think the comedy's a little too broad for my taste. But
that's not Philly special.
I'm not. Yeah,
broad comedy, not Philly special.
No, it's not.
Now, if there were a helicopter crashing in the
Exactly.
background, we could talk about it.
Well, we've put this film under the microscope. Why don't we head over to the Die Hard Oscars, put on our tuxedos?
No, we're putting on our Federation
beam in
Our Federation uniforms.
our uniforms. We're not putting on sex. This is a Star Trek movie.
We're going to beam into.
Bill's not even listening to me
I've
anymore.
just zoned out
He's
with
just
this shit. Just fucking get on with it. The John McClane Yippee-Ki-Yay Award for Best Line. And I've picked 5 nominees, but feel free to add one. Here, my nominees are as follows. Reports of my assimilation have been greatly exaggerated.
That's a good
God, I love that one.
That's a good one.
I don't want to be a statue.
Who says that?
Zephyr
Cochrane.
Cochrane.
Oh, that's
Cromwell.
right.
Quite a deep line if you think about it. Don't try and be a great man, just be a man and let history make the judgments. That's Cochrane being quoted at himself, gendering aside.
By Riker,
In my century, we don't succumb to revenge. We have a more evolved sensibility. Picard. To me, that is the theme of the film.
Yeah, that's the best line.
That's a
I
good one.
love. But then, of course, there's Jean-Luc, blow up the damn ship. No!
Yeah, don't forget resistance is futile.
Does
When
someone
Data
actually
says
say
it.
that?
Yeah, Data says it when he
That was a
intentionally
tagline,
targets the torpedoes to miss Zephyr's plane.
Right.
Oh,
He says
yeah.
resistance.
That's
The Phoenix.
Which
great.
doesn't actually make
The
that
Borg
much
also
sense,
say
but it's
it.
a really good line. Yeah.
Borg also say in the beginning. It's
Also,
it's their-
Brent
it's the Borg
Spiner nails
tagline.
it.
It's the Borg
Right,
slogan.
right.
They're like resistance is futile.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Do you guys have a pick or a
I
thought
say
or
that
an
when
addition?
I put on Tenet. My pick would be I'm going to go with Resistance is Futile because
Okay.
it's the most action movie moment in the whole movie.
I actually want to add one that the drunk Marina Sirtis, and as a fan of the show, seeing her drunk is
She gets a little sidelined in
really
this
fun.
movie.
Yeah, they give her enough to do, I think, but it's tough. It's tough to juggle everybody. But when she says, "Time, we don't have time to argue about time. We don't have this is no time to argue about time. We don't have the time," and she's like drunk. I just love that line.
There was a little bit of a Shatner delivery. The way he just did it. Time. Why am I doing Christopher Walken? All right, yeah.
I'd say no. No is my favorite.
Yeah,
line.
that's a good one.
The Hans Gruber Exceptional Thief Award for stealing the film. I have 4 nominees. Feel free to add. The aforementioned Brent Spiner as Data. Alfre Woodard as Lily Sloan. Amazing. We haven't really talked about her.
Alfre Woodard's
She's
amazing.
incredible.
Yeah.
In particular in Heart and Souls, a movie I can't even think about without blubbing. Incredible
That's
movie.
Philly special.
That's
so
weird.
good.
That's the other side of that's the
Philly
soft
special.
side of Philly
Yeah,
special.
yeah.
Michael Dorn as Worf, the Klingon head of
Interesting.
security, and Alice Krieg as the Borg Queen.
Yeah. This is so tough.
I'm giving it to Data. Brent Spiner is Data because he's the heart and soul of the movie.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, for me, the thief, I guess, more represents like someone that's coming out. Like for me, Data is always killing it, and everyone loves Data.
Yeah, that's true.
So for me, it's got to be one of the newcomers. It's probably for me tied between Alfred Woodard and Cromwell as Cochrane. I just think seeing this kind of visionary figure portrayed as an alcoholic, free love, doing it for the quote unquote wrong reasons or whatever, is just showing the humanity there. And I feel like the argument about humanity versus the linked hive mind, but embracing humanity, even flaws and all, warts and all, I think he epitomizes that rhetoric for me the best. And he's got some real zingers as well.
Well, and it's also such an arc that he goes from a corrupt police chief in the 1940s to becoming.
He is also a
I'm
lech.
making LA Confidential
though, in this, isn't he?
reference.
Isn't he? He's also a lech and a
Yeah.
sexual assaulter as well. Like in this, doesn't he
Does he sexually-
Doesn't he grope a woman or something?
Oh, you might be right.
At the beginning when he's drunk and stuff.
Yeah,
and
you
it's
might be
kind of
right.
like, I think we have to,
Yeah.
cancel him.
Yeah.
Right, then
all right,
let's move on to the
now I feel bad.
Wait, who's your pick?
All right, let's go with Alfred
I'd
Woodard.
go with the Borg Queen. I'd go with Alice.
I'd go with her too.
I'd go Alice.
Yeah.
Resistance is futile. Whatever you say.
I'm here, or is that just the Borg? What's going on?
Okay. Moving on. The Dick Thornburg.
You're going to become a Borg. You got it. You got it, baby.
okay.
Whatever
All
you
right.
mean. This is actually why I'm a Borg apologist. I'm really into the Queen.
She's great.
Can I touch the thing on the back of your head? Anyways.
Yay. The Dick Thornburg Award for Dick of the Movie, in which I have Zephyr Cochrane, the drunk, lecherous inventor with questionable taste in music and dancing, played by James Cromwell. Great performance, great character for sure. I have him. I have the snooty holographic doctor played by Robert Picardo,
Right.
Brief but memorable.
He's
appearance.
great.
Who's on Voyager? So
Yeah.
they got to bring him
not
in.
a doorstop.
Yeah.
Which I
Yes.
gather is like an in-joke, right? I'm
Yeah.
a doctor, not
That's
a
a Bones
blank.
McCoy line,
Right.
from the original show. Yeah,
Look at you, Phil. You're figuring it
I
all
did my
out.
research.
man, you're doing your homework. Yeah.
Nicky the Nose.
Yeah.
The boorish holographic gangster played by Don
What's
Stark.
shaking dicks?
Who plays him?
Don Stark.
He's great.
Yeah, he's really
Those
good.
are my 3 for Dick of the Movie. No, there's not too many dicks in the Star
There's not too many
Wars.
dicks.
I think the
You-
Borg
Star
are kind
Trek.
of dicks.
Oh, gosh,
They're just
slap
a
my
bunch of
wrist.
dicks, the Borg. I'm just trying to backpedal on my earlier opinions about the
You're a flip flopper on your Borg policy.
Yeah, and so
My Borg politics.
Ethan Phillips plays the guy when they go into, it's called The Big Goodbye, or the holo novel, where they go in and it's like empty at first, and he's like, "Oh, this is the wrong chapter." Like in the beginning
Oh,
part,
yeah,
he's
yeah.
like, "Oh, we have a strict dress code." That's actually Ethan Phillips, who plays Neelix on Voyager as well. So they had 2 Voyager, which was actively running at the time.
Yeah,
in '96.
to get in the Voyager
So they brought him,
heads.
but he's not in his like Talaxian makeup, so he's just a guy. But he's like, "We have a strict dress code, and if you boys don't leave, I'll." And then they're like scanning him, and he's flickering as the hologram.
I have to say I was pretty confused by that whole section.
Yeah, I think you were just speaking French.
Like that whole bit where they're in the 1930s. I was
Well,
very.
because there's the holodeck,
I didn't get it.
right? Is it
Yeah,
yeah.
so
They can like
the holodeck, they can create simulations. It's like a
environment.
recreational
keep up,
space.
Phil. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, well, they have to get the Borg, trans beacon.
Phil would go in there
to
and be
figure
like,
out what
"Put
they're
me
going
on
to do.
the ambulance."
Yeah, put
Can
me
I
in a
go to
helicopter.
Alcatraz in 1997?
Yeah, it was just an excuse to have Picard firing a Tommy gun, like
Yeah, that
William
was
said.
cool. Fucking
Which
rock.
actually,
Which is totally worth
which
it.
brings us to our next section. Did you guys have a pick then for Dick of the Movie?
I'm gonna go with Nicky the Nose. Just
Andy?
Yeah, I'll go Robert Picardo.
Okay.
Just because he's so great on Voyager too.
I'm going to say Cochrane. Best death is
Marco's not here, but
He's not.
I am gonna do something I've never done on the show before, which is I'm gonna have Andy do the line as Captain Picard.
Okay.
Remember the line?
What's the line?
the best death.
Marco from Die Hard. So the line
Oh,
is,
yeah, I forget.
"No more table. Next time you have a chance to kill someone, don't hesitate."
No more table. Next time you have a chance to kill someone, don't hesitate.
You owe me $150.
You owe me $150.
No, that's not part of the
sorry.
line. You just owe me $150 to let you do that.
Got it.
That's where we get all the money.
I am so cool with that. It was worth it.
Okay.
Checks in the mail, Liam.
I've got 3 best deaths. One of them is that one, the Borg drones that Picard kills with a Tommy gun. Picard's mercy kill on an assimilated colleague.
Oh, that's a
Shades
good
of
one.
aliens. In
Yeah,
that
that's a good
moment.
one.
And the Borg Queen's gruesome and prolonged demise.
Yeah, that's it. It's the
Yeah,
Borg Queens.
that's the
I-
gnarliest.
Even though I was sad to
Yay.
see, I was going to take her out for a drink, but I was sad to see her go.
Sadly,
there.
unfortunately,
we
she
can't
had her
forget-
spine disconnected.
Yeah,
so
it
that was
happened.
brutal.
They'll have to wait.
That's a great line. I have to wash my hair / get my spine disconnected.
That was graphic.
Yeah, no, and yeah, her
It's like
slow,
Predator shit.
disintegration and scream. It's brutal.
pretty disturbing.
And then when he finally kills her, you're forgetting
They
about
could have been
the
happy
wharf.
together.
The wharf when they're outside, with the deflector dish. There's a moment where he has his bat left.
Yeah,
and he
kills the guy
they've
with-
adapted, but now he's got a bat left. And that moment, I remember I saw this movie in the theater 3 times, and every time somebody was like, "Yeah!" like Worf kicked butt, and I love that moment, where he like uses a Borg cable like with a severed arm to like tie off his suit, which has been punctured, and he's losing oxygen, and then he has a bat left, which is like basically a hand-to-hand weapon. It's a blade. And he kills a Borg with it.
That is a good moment.
That's a
I think
badass
that
kill.
might be the pick.
That's a badass.
No,
kill.
I'm going to still stay with the Borg Queen.
I'm saying the Borg Queen.
Yeah, no, that's a gruesome death, and
sad
it's
that it is. Sad though it is.
They win. Yeah.
We will move on to our final section of the show, the Double Jeopardy trivia quiz. After this,
Where
very
the scores
quick
can really
break.
change. Where the scores can really change.
Yeah,
Oh my
absolutely.
God, this is getting out of hand.
Hold on. We'll be right back.
Sorry.
And we're back with our final section of the show, the Double Jeopardy trivia quiz, where the scores can really change.
Imagine a quiz night hosted by a Borg. That'd be pretty fun. I'd go to that.
Good
I'm
times. But the weirdly relaxed energy of this movie, that kind of wouldn't surprise me if there was like a trivia quiz with the Borg going on in like some subsection.
It's like
and people just milling in and out. Like they are assimilating this, but they're taking their time doing it.
We're
So
having a great
chill.
time at the holodeck playing
And actually,
trivia.
if you listen to them, they've got some good ideas.
I'd like an
about-
IPA.
Yeah, some of the points they make about individualism. Maybe we should, they give
All
us
right,
something to think about.
relax.
All right, question number 1. Which member?
I don't like the Borg, okay? I just want to be clear.
You love them.
I love one Borg in particular.
We love one, you love them all, Liam.
Oh, wait, shit.
All right, question number 1.
Borg, could you guys give us a minute here? All right, sorry. Okay, good.
Which member of the original A-Team cast appears in this film? Oh, by the way, collaboration is now mandatory.
Of the A-Team?
Of the A-Team.
Yeah.
Like the TV show, The
Yes.
A-Team.
So he plays Lieutenant Barclay.
I don't know.
Where he's like, I can't believe I'm meeting the man who invented warp drive. Yeah.
Who is that?
The
It's,
actor's name?
Murdoch. Oh no, man, I'm forgetting his name right now. This is terrible. I'm failing my own quiz.
You're right.
Liam Neeson.
He played Murdoch in the A-Team. He played
I
Lieutenant
can't remember his name.
Reginald Barclay.
Barclay, yeah.
The actor's
Man, it's so cool that they
name,
folded him
last
in here.
call,
Jesus.
Dwight Schultz.
Dwight Schultz.
See, I've never been that much of an A-Team guy. I've never really seen it.
Sort it out. Question
Okay,
number
sorry.
2.
I'm gonna kill myself now that I
Don't do that.
already
Please
got one
don't. No,
wrong.
it's just a podcast.
I'm gonna do it on your show.
Oh my!
Live.
Well, I'm gonna edit it.
Add
right.
more blood.
God.
Question number 2. In which Star Trek adjacent film did Alan Rickman play a character called Alexander Dane?
Alan Rickman.
Star Trek adjacent,
Yeah, what does that mean?
like not a Star Trek movie, but relate like Alan Rickman.
Lost in Space?
Is not correct.
Galaxy
you want
Quest.
Yes,
Oh
there
yeah,
you
right.
go.
Oh my god.
I
That's
kinda
why it's
forgot about
adjacent.
that.
Galaxy
So I actually
Quest.
have a quick story about that. I met Michael Okuda, who's he wrote the tech manual for Next Generation, and I asked him what his favorite Star Trek movie was at a convention, and he said Galaxy Quest. And I was like, oh my god.
Galaxy Quest
is,
is
good.
fantastic.
It's
It's
so
really
good.
good.
Yeah.
It's
And I can't believe I
brilliant.
didn't get that one right too. I'm doubly killing myself for sure.
All right, last one. You'll be pleased to hear the return of Convoluted Corner.
Beam me up, etc.
Question number 3. According to Jonathan Frakes, 2 notable A-list directors were offered this film before him. One of them was Ridley Scott.
Wow.
Who was the other?
I actually heard that it was Spielberg.
That may or may not be true, but
That's
it's not
not who
the
you
answer.
have?
That's
Okay.
not the answer
1990s.
that I have.
Okay. Okay.
There is
a
a clue.
director who's directed
There's
a movie. Oh, there's a clue. Go ahead.
Do you want to call?
Let's phone Data.
All right.
Get Data on the
Get
comm.
Brent
busy.
Spiner on here.
This director
in Area
comes up a
51.
lot on this show and had worked with Gates McFadden previously.
Oh shit! It's John McTiernan.
It's John
McTiernan was
Wow.
offered this movie.
The director of Die
According to
Hard.
Jonathan Frakes,
Huh. I never heard that.
Holy shit!
That's so cool.
and it all comes back.
See, okay,
to
I take
Die
back
Hard.
everything I said before because John McTiernan directing a Star Trek movie
Ah,
could fucking rock.
Absolutely.
Can we
Like
get that
would
now?
be
I know there's been talks
amazing.
about Tarantino. You know, he has a script going around, but McTiernan would be rad.
Yeah, especially in that. I mean, that would be right after Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, 1 year later. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see what he would do with it, especially
real-
this story.
Wow.
So we
Never heard
will
that
never
one.
know, but
That's
it's fun
great.
to think about. Well, Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show.
great.
What's coming up on the AndyPlex? Anything in the pipeline that you're excited about? Like what or are there episodes people should check out?
Yeah, so I actually have a Star Trek First Contact episode called First Contacts About Ourselves, and it my co-host Adam Furberg, who's done a few episodes of the show, and he and I had a Star Trek podcast together for a while. Hilarious comedian, one of my best friends, also massive Star Trek fan, and he and I do and honestly, I felt compelled to talk about First Contact after the January 2nd attacks, where I felt like the groupthink via social media was very Borg. And I was just like, I have to talk about it. And I don't get political on my show at all. It's a movie show. But I felt like I had to do it. But yeah, like you said, we just had Kevin Mangold on to talk about Frozen Empire. So yeah, that's super exciting. And I believe, if you are willing, we'll be having you on to talk about the Joel Schumacher 1993 piece. You say
Falling Down.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a Philly
Oh,
special.
is that a movie? I've never seen
Yeah.
that. Is that good?
Shut up.
Okay, sorry.
So so the concept of the show, as you say, is you have people on who they talk about their journeys in the entertainment industry, and you've just had somebody on who was very interesting from the recent Ghostbusters movie, right?
Yes, that's right. His name is Kevin Mangold. He was in the newest Ghostbusters movie, Frozen Empire, which just came out in March. And he's amazing. He's a stuntman, and what a journey, what a story. And he got to be in the suit to play Slimer in the new one.
Wow, so he's Slimer in the
He's
new
Slimer, and I'm a
Ghostbusters.
massive Ghostbusters fan.
How cool. You had Slimer on your show.
I had Slimer on my show. I'm still tripping out, Phil. It's
awesome.
really, really cool. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a really cool format that has people seem to like, and it's just really fun. And then pick a movie that either they want to talk about that's newer. So thank you so much, Phil.
We've talked about
Liam.
that. Hopefully, I will be coming back on the AndyPlex for a 4th time.
Yes,
to talk
and
about
Liam, I'd love to have you as well if you ever have any time.
Thanks, yeah, for sure.
Love to have you
can we
on,
do
man.
Falling Down?
Yeah, let's do it. All right, Phil, sorry, you're fired.
I got
honestly,
a lot of guns.
It's really an honor to be on your show. I'm such a fan, and
Thanks, Andy.
You're too kind.
I love it, and I just think you guys have such a good product, and you guys are both so fun and talented, and just I love listening to you guys talk. So anyway, it's a real honor to be here.
Stop, but keep going.
Yeah, and
Thanks,
I hope we can hang more. And it's funny, I met Liam at Aliens.
I was going to. I meant to tell this
At the
story
Egyptian,
because it was such a lovely moment. We can close on this for warm and fuzzy vibes. When Liam and I went to see Aliens at the Egyptian,
Best night of my life.
few months ago.
Good. Yeah.
It was an incredible night. We were sitting in the front row. The guy came in and did the intro to the movie. And just as the lights went down, Liam and I looked across the front row and saw Andy and Tony sitting there. And it was like everybody, it was like that Radiohead song, Everything in Its Right Place. It may as well have started playing.
I know.
And the movie began, and it was like we were all there to pay our respects to this
Greatest
incredible
movie ever made.
It's
towering
so good,
achievement. Of fans of sci-fi and fans of the sci-fi genre. So, Andy, it's been a blast to have you. Thank you for lending us all of your expertise and broadcasting talent. Everybody, check out the AndyPlex Andy show if you're interested in that. And I don't know if we don't really have anything to plug. We've been on a bunch of things, but I checked the schedules because our dates are all over the place.
Yeah,
there's plenty of other things that we've got going on.
We're still on X.
We're still on X.
Not the drug. We're on the social media website. I'm Liam G. Billingham. Phil, you've been taking some meetings, right, with Elon. You're sort of maybe going to join the board. So how's that going? He gave you a
Borg
Cybertruck.
or the board? That's what. Well, funnily enough, Elon has some pretty interesting ideas about assimilation and the collective society. So he's telling me about that. I'm going to go in next week. They did say something about that I might be assimilated into a giant machine, but who
knows? Anything.
If it's good for my career, so
it'll be really great.
I'll give it a whirl.
Whatever
Fantastic.
it takes.
Yeah.
We're on X talking bullshit
You can
about
email us
90s
at
movies.
diehardoab@gmail.com. Next time on the show,
Daylight.
it's Die Hard in a Jesus movie is the theory that I'm operating on right now. That's the one I'm operating on.
Yeah,
The Last Temptation of Sly.
Stay tuned for that. We'll be back
next time with Sylvester Stallone as Jesus. Die Hard on a Blank is a podcast created and hosted by Philip Gawthorne. Liam Billingham co-hosts and produces the show. Mike Mayer and Michael Sugar are the executive producers. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at DieHardOAB. Rate, review, follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Most importantly, tell your movie podcast-loving friends about Die Hard on a Blank. See you next time on Die Hard on a Blank.